China, once a weak and impoverished country, has undergone a tremendous transformation rarely seen in human history. It's reinvigorating itself, re-emerging as a major economic powerhouse. It's also opening up and interacting with the world like never before. What has happened since the People's Republic of China was founded in 1949? How has the country engaged with the world in the last 70 years? This 5-episode documentary retraces the path China has taken, examining how it has impacted and has been impacted by the world. The world today is facing new challenges. Protectionism and unilateralism are on the rise. Globalization is at a crossroads. How to tackle these issues? China is calling for the world to unite. It was 5 principles as early in China. The 5 principles were widely welcomed by the newly independent nations in the colonial movement had grown in post-war era, and they brought China and other developing countries closer to each other. In the 1970s, when the Cold War was casting a shadow over the world, the confrontation between China and the US-led West was about to reach a turning point. In the Chinese Beijing, another week is just beginning. Monday is 20-year chain of the.
My name is Sean. I'm from New York. I just turned 20. I have been English, children, health and education. I've been here in Beijing for 7 years, and because I love this sport, ping pong. It's the national sport here. So for another country to take ping pong under their team for the first 2 or 3 years, I played ping pong 4 times a week.
你想它 A 这么飞过去，这个弧线是发力，这是对。
Former national coach Li Jin is so infected by Shane's enthusiasm for table tennis that he agreed to train him every Monday. As Shane improves, he dreams of one day playing against his idol, world champion Ma Long.
I think for me, what would be really exciting is if I could actually meet and like practice with Chinese national team. But if I could actually practice with them for like, even one day, but perhaps like for a month would be great. I can increase my level drastically, very quickly. So this is really why I'm looking for you, Ma Long. Hey, Grandma. I love you.
Today, many young Americans, like Shane, are learning in their history class that ping pong is much more than a sport. It once changed how the US and China viewed each other and transformed the world pattern. Towards the end of the 1960s, US President Richard Nixon and his national security advisor Henry Kissinger began mulling the benefits of restoring relations with China. They saw the move as a means of both exiting the battlefields in Vietnam and acquiring leverage in the Cold War. The two countries eventually opened a secret dialogue. But the real breakthrough came courtesy of a public encounter between the Chinese and US ping pong teams during the 1971 World Table Tennis Championships in Nagoya, Japan. Liang Ge is now 69. During his career, he participated in numerous international table tennis tournaments, but none sticks in his memory like the Nagoya Championships 48 years ago.
The gold medal in the middle, that's from the 31st World Table Tennis Championships. I was the winner in the team and doubles events. This is a photograph of me playing with Zhuang Zedong. Each team was allotted a time to train in the arena before the competition. We were about to leave for training. A bus was pulling up. It was specially for the Chinese players. Suddenly, Cohen approached. He was this young American with long hair. He should have been on the US team bus, but it had already left. Our bus was still there, with the door open, so he just got on. As soon as he got on the bus and turned around, we saw the USA logo on his clothing. The whole bus suddenly went quiet.
The Chinese players on the bus had no idea what to do about the situation. Only Zhuang Zedong, the team's leading player, reacted. He stepped forward to shake Cohen's hand and speak to him through an interpreter.
We arrived at the gym. We were surprised to see so many reporters there taking pictures. Zhuang got off the bus and presented Cohen with a Hangzhou silkscreen picture.
The encounter was captured on film, and the spontaneous show of goodwill between the US and Chinese teams became the talk of the tournament. A few days later, as the US team was preparing to leave Nagoya, they received an unexpected invitation from Beijing to visit China.
The whole world paid attention. Table tennis had a profound impact on the process of China and the US establishing diplomatic ties.
The signal was picked up by President Nixon. On the same day that the US table tennis team was welcomed by Premier Zhou Enlai in Beijing, Nixon announced that Washington was easing its travel restrictions and trade embargo against China. The ripple effects of what had already become known as ping-pong diplomacy paved the way for Richard Nixon's groundbreaking February 1972 visit to China. The two countries were taking the first steps toward normalizing relations. This included signing the historic Shanghai Communique, which marked the end of mutual confrontation. Nixon later called it the week that changed the world. Compared to Glenn Cowan's accidental encounter with the Chinese team in 1971, Shane Oliver's experience with China's table tennis players seems far more mundane.
I was wondering, do you have any time tonight?
He's received a call from his friend Zhu Fang. The former top table tennis player knows many members of the Chinese national team and has agreed to help.
Shane! Do you think it'd be possible to help me to reach out to Ma Long, just to tell him, like, hey, there's this foreigner over here that wants to play ping pong with you? Is that possible? Oh my gosh.
Of course, I will try to help you. Anyway, you like
Ordinary people like Shane Oliver are living in a world shaped by ping-pong diplomacy. The most fitting metaphor for the impact it had globally was provided by Chairman Mao himself. The little ball, he said, moves the big ball. The ice-breaking between China and the United States triggered an immediate chain effect in the West. By the end of the 1970s, all the major European nations had established diplomatic ties with China.
Nixon's trip to China triggered a new wave of China and European countries establishing diplomatic relations, most notably the major powers in Europe.
The improvement of the China-US relationship changed the pattern of international relations. It was a prelude to a policy that China would launch at the end of 1978. At a meeting of the country's top leadership, Deng Xiaoping announced a shift in the country's focus to economic development by means of a policy called Reform and Opening Up. The reform has changed China profoundly, allowing it to embrace the world, beginning with trade and eventually expanding into every area of Chinese society. At the same time, the world has also unleashed the huge potential of China, to the extent that it is today the world's second largest economy. China and the world have, since 1978, grown closer than ever before. As President Xi Jinping said, the past 4 decades have witnessed how China could promote an open world economy and build a community of shared future for mankind. But China's economic success has been so much more than soaring economic figures. It's hard to imagine today that when China launched the economic reform in 1978, more than 88% of its population were living on less than $2 a day. Decades of reform and opening up have fueled the most remarkable achievements in poverty alleviation in human history.
We wanted to accomplish the task of providing adequate food and clothing for all, with no one ethnic group, no one individual, and no one family left behind. This was something rare in the world.
This is Nandan County in South China's Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region. Part of the Yungui Plateau, this mountainous area is famous for its karst landforms. The scenery may be beautiful, but for the local community it means poverty because there's hardly any land fit for farming and building roads. Li Rongbin's plot of land was too small to support his family by farming. 9 family members had to live in a small shelter measuring less than 40 square meters. But since June 2017, Li Rongbin's village has been included in a relocation project, which is part of a massive poverty reduction campaign in Guangxi. 1.4 billion yuan has been invested in building 2,400 new apartments. Li and another 13,000 people have now left areas with extremely poor living conditions and have moved into new apartments.
I find it hard to believe that the country would give me an apartment to live in. We used to live in a shelter, but now we're living in a beautiful apartment. It's way better than before.
Its huge economic success on the global market has provided the resources for China to step up its efforts to reduce domestic poverty. Having made poverty reduction a key political target for the Communist Party and the central government, President Xi Jinping has, ever since taking office, travelled extensively investigating the situation in areas of extreme poverty and build an all-round well-off society by 2020, using all the resources available. In their brand new 160 square metre apartment, the Li family are starting a new life. Li has found a job in construction and his children are attending the local school. "400 kilometres away in Longshan County. Around 2,000 years ago, Pan Yanqin's ancestors built a terrace field to maximise the use of the slope. What their ancestors bequeathed to them will become critical in their escape from poverty. Unlike Li's village, which has been relocated, Pan's village will be preserved. Roads have been paved and the power grid connected. The spectacular terraces are central to Longshan's development plan, as tourism is becoming the pillar industry here. Pan worked away from her home village as a migrant worker for many years. Now she's returned. She and her husband are running a small hotel for tourists. The bond between her and her ancestors is being preserved. President Xi Jinping has proposed the concept of poverty alleviation that is targeted. It requires the government to precisely identify who are poor and the reasons for their poverty. This is in order to work out appropriate measures for helping them, from improving social services to infrastructure development to basic medical services. An online database has been established as a poverty registry covering 128,000 villages, nearly 90 million people. The database is updated on an annual basis. She has called on Communist Party organisations at the grassroots level to take the lead in poverty alleviation. Some 540,000 officials have been dispatched to the front line. That means, on average, 4 officials will look after each of the 128,000 villages registered. They will stay there for 2 to 3 years, exclusively working on the local development plan and coordinating resources for the villagers. Based on the $1.9 a day poverty line, in the past 4 decades, China has lifted 850 million people out of poverty, with the percentage of those living in extreme poverty falling from 88% to less than 2%. China, as the greatest contributor to global poverty alleviation, accounts for over 70% of the world's population lifted out of poverty in the same period. Experts believe that China's success in poverty reduction is a major contribution to humanity.
In the worldwide poverty reduction campaign, the share we've accounted for amounts to 70%. This is based on the fact that we used to be relatively poor and backward, so we cannot underestimate this achievement.
At the same time, China is also offering itself to other countries in their fight against poverty. Many African countries have welcomed a steady stream of Chinese agricultural experts. China has also trained tens of thousands of people for local communities, including teachers, school managers, agricultural technicians, and medical workers.